Horror. A powerhouse of a genre within entertainment. Those who hate it will tell you that all the scary content out there is lazy, poorly written, or has little substance. Those that love it know all these things already and watch anyway. Why? 'Cause horror is fun.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine.
There's just something about the suspense that you get from a horror book or movie that you just don't get from other genres. And of course, I'm not saying all horror is poorly written. There's plenty of material that's out there with a wealth of depth lurking within, some of which we'll be discussing right here, right now. I'm Frankie, and welcome to the world of horror and media. Now, where should we begin when discussing a topic like this? I guess the best place to start would be to answer the question, what exactly is horror? Horror is a genre that plays on fears and phobias to create intense feelings of fear, shock, or disgust. The word itself comes from the Latin word... not even gonna try to pronounce that.
Orrere.
Which translates to tremble or shudder. This is what makes the genre so special. Pretty much any genre can and will make you feel a variety of emotions. Joy, sadness, anger, etc. But as far as fear goes, the best other genres can manage is usually just suspense. True fear is almost exclusive to horror. Now, before we continue, I feel it's important that we also define the emotion we call fear. So, what is it? Fear is actually our fight or flight responding to stimuli that we perceive as a threat. It's an emotion that's intrinsically linked to our survival instincts. But Frankie, what pray tell is your question, sir, accurate representation of my average viewer? What does this mean for horror and entertainment? I am so very glad you asked, my handsome and chiseled friend. Since fear is so intertwined with these survival instincts, things that evoke fear typically have a much greater impact on us than things that cause other types of emotion. To demonstrate what I mean here, I'd like to share with you all the results of a small survey I conducted as part of my research for this video. How small, you ask? Small enough that the sample size that I have is nowhere near large enough to produce any kind of accurate data. Despite that, however, I do believe my findings are interesting enough to share with you all. Some of you may disagree. I say, too bad. So I gathered a bunch of my friends and family and asked them 4 questions. What is your earliest memory of being happy? What is your earliest memory of being angry? What is your earliest memory of being afraid? Of these memories, which one is the most vivid, detailed memory? In other words, which one are you able to recall most accurately? What I found is that the vast majority of those I surveyed responded by saying that they were most accurately able to recount the memory of them being afraid. What I found most interesting, though, is that it wasn't the events of the memory that they were able to recall per se, but specifically the feelings of dread and helplessness that they felt during these encounters. Why is this the case, though? I believe it circles back to their survival instincts. Since they believed what occurred during these memories posed a threat to them, they internalized the memories so that if they were to ever run into similar situations down the line, they could be more prepared for them. This is what gives horror its power. This ability to provoke such a primal reaction in its audience that just sticks with you. Alright, cool. Fear defined. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the ways that different mediums tackle the genre. After all, reading a book isn't the same as watching a movie, which itself is pretty different from playing a video game. Each use their own techniques, some expanding off on others in interesting ways. Let's start with books. Since books have no visuals, it's on the author to use creative use of imagery to paint the scene in our minds. This is true for all literature, but it's especially important for horror fiction. The main objective of a horror story is to frighten the reader. If the author doesn't properly convey the details to their audience, how will they get scared? There's a couple of ways authors go about achieving this goal. One way is like this. The old gentleman took a step back with the air of one very much surprised and a trifle hurt. And at that, Mr. Hyde broke out of all bounds and clubbed him into the earth. And next moment, with ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows, under which the bones were audibly shattered and the body jumped upon the roadway. At the horror of these sights and sounds, the maid fainted. This is an excerpt from the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a story about a doctor who tries to find a way to escape the dark urges within him, but in doing so, transforms himself into something sinister. He uses this transformation to act out his evil impulses under the guise of an alter ego, that being Mr. Hyde. That passage is one such moment where Hyde came out and mercilessly beat someone to death. The details that the author Robert Louis Stevenson gives is just enough for us to be able to create the scene in our head. The way Hyde pounces on his victim and beats him down with his cane, the brutal stomping, the cracking of bones, and the gruesome sight of this attack being enough to make someone nearby faint from the horror of it all. It's bellissimo. Another way authors can achieve their scares, which I believe is arguably even better, is the exclusion of certain details. And nowhere better is this demonstrated than within cosmic horror.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire?
This is without a doubt my favorite type of horror for numerous reasons. There's a quote by H.P. Lovecraft, a prolific and, controversial author within the genre. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. That's the type of fear that cosmic horror plays on. Let's take a look at a passage from Call of Cthulhu to get a better understanding of what I mean. It lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of that poisoned city of madness. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy. Such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. I love this shit. This entity that's so horrifying that it's literally indescribable, incomprehensible. Cthulhu, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth. All these monsters that Scary Zuckerberg here has penned are entities that could literally shatter your mind just by looking at them. And they're mostly all described using language like that from the passage I just read. The beauty of cosmic horror is its lack of detail. Just look at these images. These are all different interpretations of these creatures based off of the bare descriptions that Lovecraft gives you. You and a friend could read the same story, but come up with wildly different images than each other. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty damn cool, and it's a big part of the fun I get from reading these types of stories. A step up from books, let's talk about graphic novels. Now that there are visuals, a lot less work needs to be spent on fancy language to describe what's going on. Instead, that effort needs to be focused on illustrations. That much is obvious, but just like imagery in classic literature, good design is even more important here than in other genres. Unfortunately, I don't really have much to say about horror comics, mostly because I haven't really read any. The few that are out there that I know about aren't really horror per se, more so just themed around it like Hellboy and Spawn. Sure, there's The Walking Dead, but if I'm gonna be honest, I dislike the show so much that I've actually avoided the comic it's based on. I've heard a lot of people say it's better, but people also say the new chapters of Berserk are just as good as Miura's works, and, well, I'll just save that topic for another video. And believe me, I will be talking about that. Anyway, I don't want to sit here ranting about something I dislike and bring down the mood. So I'll instead direct you to Your Movie Sucks video on the topic.
The Walking Dead is one of the most overrated TV shows of all time.
He voices just about every complaint that I have about it. I'll leave a link in the description for those who haven't seen it yet. Oh, and if you guys have any good recommendations for horror comics, please let me know in the comments down below. Please and thank you. Back to the topic at hand. So instead of comics, let's talk about manga. And who better to talk about than the legend himself, Junji Ito. This man is a god of horror. With titles such as Tomie and Uzumaki, Ito has captured the hearts of many a horror enthusiast. He has this uncanny ability to take the strangest concepts and do some wild fuck shit with them.
例えば「なめくじ少女」っていう作品はある日鏡で自分の舌を見てていろいろ動かしてたらなんかなめくじに似てるなってことに気がついてですね、そこで自分の舌がなめくじになっちゃったら気持ち悪いだろうなっていうところからデザインしましたんで。
Take Uzumaki for example. The story is about a town that becomes infected with the concept of spirals. What does that even mean? Well, yeah. Ito took something as mundane as a spiral and, pun intended, twisted it into this. Not even cats are safe from this man. He has tons of incredible stories between his adaptations and original works, and I highly recommend you check him out. Let's move on to TV and film. Horror is a classic genre in film. It's actually just about as old as film itself. What is widely considered to be the first horror movie is a 3-minute short called, and I'm sorry if I butchered this pronunciation, Le Manoir du Diable, that was made in 1896. The name translates to The House of the Devil, and was directed by George Méliès. Again, sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. A pioneer in the earliest days of film and is regarded as the father of special effects. But the thing is, Méliès never intended for the film to be scary, and... yeah. The scariest thing that happens is when someone fucks up the set. But while not really scary, it does have elements of horror. Ghosts, witches, the devil. It really helps illustrate how these elements are so deeply ingrained in entertainment. I mean, it's literally a meme that the first thing that happens when something hits the public domain is someone makes a horror project out of it. And why wouldn't they? As I said before, horror is the most fun genre. Now that there's motion to the visuals, there's even less work for the viewer to connect the dots to understand what's happening. You ever read a manga and when a fight breaks out, you just kind of lose track of what's happening in the chaos, and then when the anime comes out, you're just like, oh! It's kind of like that. Another hurdle in filmmaking is the budget. In TV and film, budgetary concerns are constantly looming over the shoulders of directors like a father watching over their kid while working on a project. Make too many mistakes, and Big Daddy Studio will take over and force some changes. So, compromises have to be made to stay on budget, and unless a director can find creative ways around these limitations, it could compromise the vision of the film.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
But if you're crafty enough, even a low-budget film can put out some spoopy shit. So in the event compromises do need to be made, you need to sacrifice certain things and others need to be prioritized. So what are the most important parts that need to be prioritized to make a project, namely a horror project, successful? Well, that's kinda hard to get into. As with all art, it's subjective. What could be important to one person may not be so for another. Some people just want to see a gory slasher with cheap scares, while others want something with a little more depth. There's no wrong way to watch a movie, unless you like these. If you do, please seek help. But when it comes to what I'm looking for in a horror movie, what I look for most are two things. A chilling, slow build, and for deeper meanings. So what the fuck does that mean? Let's start with the slow build. I love a good slow rise in tension, a good creepy atmosphere that causes anxiety to build up inside until you're on the verge of panic. Something that really helps this hit home is good music and sound design. Music can help inform on, and even manipulate, how someone should feel during a scene. Let's take a look at one of my favorite horror movies to get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. It Follows is a very interesting movie with a very strange premise. It's basically about a demonic STD. Let me explain. So there's this thing, some unknowable entity, that's going around killing people, and the way it targets people is unique. It targets a single person and will follow that person to the ends of the earth until the day they die, or it catches up to them and kills the target themselves.
Just kill me! Kill me!
The only way to make it change its target is to sleep with someone, hence the demonic STD. They then become the target, but if they die, the previous target is marked once again. No one knows what this thing is. where it came from, why it's doing this, or how it even all started. And I believe this is one of the best elements of the entity. It's kinda like a joke. Once you explain it, it's not really funny anymore. The movie just gives us the bare minimum of what we need to understand about this thing, and it's great. So now that we understand what we're dealing with, where do the scares come in? Funny enough, a very similar premise was used for a comedy skit years ago. And hell, the entity disguises itself as a random-ass person to help sneak up on its targets. So unless you're scared of the elderly, which, I mean, fair, you're probably not going to get very spooked. But it's how it's presented that affects the tone, and the music and sound design go a long way in achieving its goal. They elevate the film to something greater than it has any reason to be. The music hits, and you just feel it.
Don't open the door. See? Everything's okay.
See what I mean? Another really good example achieves its scare through completely different means. The classic chestburster scene in the original Alien film is really cool for numerous reasons. For those who haven't seen the scene, the character Kane had recently been attacked by an alien creature that attached itself to his face. After a bit of time, it eventually detaches on its own, and everyone is left puzzled and concerned for their friend. Unfortunately, these concerns are soon realized. The crew are all happily enjoying a meal together when Kane begins to convulse. Everyone rushes to help their friend when his chest begins to pop. After a struggle, a cute little fella pops out to say hello and then scurries off. Something I love about this scene is that there's actually no music at all. There's nothing to inform the audience on how to feel, so they're genuinely just as anxious as the characters on screen. Thanks to stellar cinematography, sound design, and incredible practical effects, one of the most infamous scenes in film was born. Another amazing element of this scene is the acting, or I guess you could argue the lack thereof, since the actors weren't actually informed on what was going to happen in the scene. Ridley Scott wanted genuine reactions, so he hid the rig used for the practical effects and only told the cast their positions. The art director for the film, Roger Christensen, actually wrote about how they filmed this scene in his book, Cinema Alchemist. It's a really interesting read, so I definitely recommend checking it out. I mentioned earlier that another thing that's important to me is a deeper meaning within the plot. Many monsters and antagonists in horror fiction are meant to represent some sort of fear. Slashers like Jason or Michael Myers literally represent death itself, and something like the alien pathogen from The Thing represents something a little more abstract. It represents the fear of change and losing control. That's just the basics of what I'm trying to say, though. To really demonstrate what I mean, let's take a look at the music video for Fantasy by Die, or DYE, or however you're supposed to say it. There's a lot to unpack in this video, and a lot of NSFW shit going on, so I'll do my best to keep this brief. Basically, teens sneak into a pool after hours to have some fun, and shit goes horribly wrong, with almost all of them transforming into these hideous abominations. No one truly knows what's going on in the video, but the most widely accepted answer for the fuck shit that happens is that it's all one big metaphor for stress and the dangers it can have on a young mind. Even the eldritch monster at the end is believed to represent forbidden knowledge, which is why it literally blows the mind of the main character. But I believe it's deeper than that. I think it represents society's relatively recent pivot towards its views on sex. Think about it. There's so many movies out there about this very thing, like American Pie and Superbad. Fuck, 50 Shades of Grey was one of the best-selling books of 2011. Sex is now more accepted than ever, and even encouraged, especially online. Just look at how upset people were when they removed NSFW content from Tumblr. To those who have no interest in sex or feel as though they aren't ready, all the societal pressure can really get to them. That's why the teens turned into monsters in the music video. The main character was perceiving them as something horrifying for committing to such an act. And her mind wasn't shattering due to receiving forbidden knowledge, it was her cracking under all the pressure. This is what I'm talking about. Having such a topic conveyed in an interesting way that really makes you think. This is what I look for, not just in horror, but all media. That's not to say I can't enjoy some dub horror. Hell, I love the first couple Final Destination movies. But having subtext like that really elevates a project for me. And here we are, horror in video games. First and foremost, I am a gamer. I may be a film student and a video editor, but my true passion lies in gaming. In fact, My first major when going to college was actually game design. Oh, shit, getting off track again. One of my earliest memories was playing Resident Evil 0 with my dad. He handed me the strategy guide and we played through the entire game together, start to finish. If it wasn't for that experience, I don't know if I'd be into games as much as I am now. Not only that, but it also acted as my gateway into horror. From there, I started watching scary movies like Alien and old slasher flicks, and as I got older and the internet became more prevalent, I began to discover cool shit like creepypastas, analog horror series like Marble Hornets, and that one weird webcomic where absolutely nothing happens at the end. You know the one I'm talking about. But even after all this time and all the content I've consumed, I still believe that horror is a genre best suited for games for one simple fact. It's interactive. You're the one controlling the character, and once you become immersed, you become the one in danger. Not only that, but video games build off the techniques of film and add their own unique elements. Now, what would make for a good example? There's just so many damn horror games to pick from. Oh, remember PT? That game that made PS4 sell for literal hundreds, even thousands? This Silent Hill demo took the world by storm with its incredible atmosphere and extremely effective scares. Really goes to show the creative god that is Kojima, since this was his first foray into horror. What made PT so successful was a couple of factors. First was its accessibility. The demo was free, so as long as you had a PS4, you could play it easily. Second was how well it immediately immersed you into the experience. It starts off slow, dropping you into a room that exits into a normal-looking hallway. This hallway, however, loops into itself, and every loop is scarier than the last. The pacing of the scares is masterfully done, slowly building up and allowing you to settle into your situation before really hitting you hard with some weird shit.
Oh, were those fucking crazy eyeballs? Oh, hey, baby.
So you drowned your sorrows in booze. She had to get a part-time job working a grocery store cash register.
Oh, it's a baby talking.
Reason she could earn
Okay.
Okay, Aaron.
Yeah.
Next time on fucking Game Grumps, I am done.
No.
I am done.
This game was so popular that after it was taken down by the demons at Konami, people scrambled to make games based off the experience to fill the void that was left behind. Projects such as Visage and Layers of Fear were born from this scramble and became very successful in their own right. Even Resident Evil 7 took inspiration from PT, which is evident by the eerily similar level design. Resident Evil and games like it, however, managed to bring something unique to the table in the form of their own subgenre. The way that survival horror games achieve their scares is through something called inventory management. You have a limited amount of items the game will give you throughout your journey, and a limited amount of inventory space in which to carry it all. So you need to be smart about how you use these resources, and sometimes even have to make sacrifices, leaving valuable items behind to make room for others. This creates anxiety in the player as they don't know what kind of challenges await them, and if they even have the means to overcome them. This anxiety then leaves them vulnerable to the actual scares throughout the game, and this shit fucking works. The feeling of walking into a quarantine zone in Dead Space when you're already short on ammo, or a horde of clickers with no shivs in The Last of Us, is torture on the nerves. And if you're into masochism, check out Fear and Hunger. I won't elaborate further. If you know, you know. Oh, God. You know. There's so much more that I would like to talk about, and in fact, I was originally going to. The original draft of this video was about double the length, but it felt really unfocused as a result. I also didn't want to go overboard with my first video for a few reasons. I didn't want to overload it with content in case I decided to return to the topic of horror further down the line. And oh yeah, I definitely will be. I also didn't want to overwhelm myself with such a massive project when I've never made anything that large before. And holy fuck was I overwhelmed! To give you an idea, I started making this fucking thing back in late 2022. Yeah, that damn long ago. I was working a lot of hours and going to college at the same time, and I was also trying to balance a social life alongside that. Then some weird life shit got in the way, and long story short, I got halfway through the video before dropping it completely. I tried multiple times to go back and start working on it again, but it just felt so daunting. And I kind of fell into a bit of gaming, which made it even harder to motivate myself to get back to it. And I know that's not an excuse, but there were just so many games.
Oh, 50, 50, 50. Buddy types. Lots of fire. Pussy. Human women.
So many games. But then I got the idea. If the project I made was intimidating me that much, why not just scrap it and start over from scratch? And so, that's what I did. And now here we are. And I have to say, I'm much happier with this final product, and I truly hope you all enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. I have a lot of ideas for what to do next, and I'll use this experience and learn from my mistakes so that I can improve my work habits and so that those ideas can be fully realized. And if there's anything you all wish to see me do, please leave suggestions down in the comments below. Before I go, remember that throwaway joke I made earlier about H.P. Lovecraft being scary Zuckerberg? I showed the images to my friends, and while joking around about it, I came up with a theory. What if Zuckerberg is actually a reptilian clone of H.P. Lovecraft, but because he didn't want people to know, he made a skin suit to look like his old self? But it isn't quite right, and that's why it looks a bit different. But it goes even further.
What if Zuckerberg is a failed modern clone of Lovecraft? He was supposed to modernize the Lovecraftian genre with new technologies, but failed to do so.
That's what social media was supposed to be. A way to connect everyone, not just in the metaphorical sense, but physically as well. Connect our minds and bodies so that humanity may reach a higher existence. Separate, we are weak, but together, we can become God.
And maybe, just maybe, the metaverse was the culmination of his plan.
Just something for you to think about.